In 2005, a plane had been flying for 2 hours above Athens, Greece, circling aimlessly in the sky. When two fighter jets were deployed to intercept it, their pilots saw something terrifying. The passengers were unconscious. But near the cockpit, they spotted one man barely clinging to life. Just minutes later, the plane crashed into a mountain. The question is, why were the passengers and crew unconscious? And what caused the crash? Before we begin this story, if you're new to this channel, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button so you stay updated with JP Amazing Stories. On August 14, 2005, in Larnaca, Cyprus, a Boeing 737 from Helios Airways landed at Larnaca Airport after arriving from London. The flight crew had reported a strange noise coming from the service door when opened. They requested a full inspection of the door since in just a few hours the plane was scheduled to fly again, this time to Prague, Czech Republic. Ground engineers immediately responded and quickly fixed the issue with the door. Since they were already there, they also decided to check the pressurization system to ensure there were no leaks. The pressurization system is responsible for pumping safe, breathable air into the cabin, especially important when flying at high altitudes. To help you understand, think about hiking up a mountain. As you go higher, it becomes harder to breathe. That's because the air pressure drops with altitude. Now imagine a plane flying much higher than any mountain. If the pressurization system fails, oxygen levels drop dangerously low. Without it, people on board can die due to lack of oxygen. This is why planes are equipped with automatic pressurization systems. They maintain safe cabin pressure without pilot intervention. Now let's go back to the ground engineers. Before they inspected the system, they had to switch it from automatic to manual mode. They conducted the checks, found no leaks, and everything seemed fine. But when they finished, they all left, forgetting one crucial thing: to switch the pressurization system back to automatic. This single oversight would doom Helios Flight 522. At that time, the atmosphere in Cyprus was joyful. It was summer, from June to September, the peak of the tourist season. The airport in Larnaca was packed with travelers. Passengers were happy as they boarded Helios Flight 522. Among those greeting them with a smile was flight attendant Andreas Prodromou. The cabin crew was preparing for the next leg of their journey, flying first to Athens and then to Prague. The captain of the flight was Hans Mertin, a German contract pilot hired by Helios due to a shortage of pilots. The co-pilot was Pambos Karalambos, who had been working with Helios for 5 years. Before takeoff, the crew went through their required checks of all onboard systems, a routine safety procedure. But they missed one thing. The pressurization system was still set to manual. Helios, being a charter airline, had 115 passengers and 5 flight attendants on board that day. Shortly after takeoff, as the plane climbed to cruising altitude, everything appeared normal. But then, an alarm went off. This alarm was meant to alert pilots if the plane wasn't pressurized properly during takeoff. They were confused. Why was it going off now, mid-flight? While still trying to understand the first alarm, another one sounded, the master caution alarm. Panic began to build inside the cockpit. The pilots inspected all systems, but nothing seemed wrong. They contacted ground engineers for help troubleshooting the issue. Meanwhile, the passengers had no idea they were already in serious danger. Suddenly, the emergency oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. The flight attendants were stunned but tried to remain calm, instructing passengers to put on their masks. The passengers were nervous, confused, and scared, but followed directions. What the pilots didn't realize was that the cabin had already lost pressure and oxygen levels were plummeting. They still had no clue why the alarms were sounding or why their systems were overheating. Then, the cockpit went silent. Communication was lost. At that point, both the captain and co-pilot had lost consciousness. Their brains were deprived of oxygen, a condition known as hypoxia. It's deadly. If the brain is without oxygen for just 4 minutes, permanent damage can occur. Prolonged exposure can lead to death. The plane continued flying, now on autopilot, circling above Athens for 2 hours. Inside the cabin, passengers who had used the emergency masks also began passing out as the limited oxygen ran out. Andreas, along with another flight attendant named Horace, noticed that the oxygen supply from the masks was depleted. They rushed to grab portable oxygen tanks, trying to wake passengers, but no one responded. They checked on their fellow crew members, but they too were unconscious. Realizing the severity of the situation, the two walked toward the cockpit. But the cockpit was locked and required a security code to enter. In their panic and confusion, they struggled to input the correct code. Meanwhile, Greek air traffic control had noticed that the aircraft had been circling for over 2 hours without any radio communication. Worried about a possible hijacking, they deployed 2 fighter jets to intercept. Just as the fighter jets approached the aircraft, the 2 flight attendants finally opened the cockpit door. Inside, they saw the pilots unconscious. Andreas quickly sat in the captain's seat. He had some flight experience and he knew how to fly a plane. One of the fighter jet pilots looked through the window of the aircraft and was shocked. The passengers were all unconscious, oxygen masks still strapped to their faces. He then glanced at the cockpit, where he saw a man now sitting at the controls. Andreas. Next to him, the co-pilot remained slumped in his seat, lifeless. The problem now was fuel. The plane had been flying for hours and could run out at any moment. Andreas disengaged autopilot and tried to manually control the aircraft. He saw the fighter jet outside the window, but his focus was on trying to fly. Then, disaster struck. The right engine exploded, having run out of fuel. Moments later, the left engine failed too. Andreas lost all control of the aircraft. Just a few seconds later, the plane crashed into a mountain. Rescue and fire crews rushed to the crash site, but there were no survivors. This became the worst air disaster in the history of Greece. The families of the passengers immediately went to Helios Airways, demanding answers. A long investigation followed. They recovered the black box and flight recorder, and simulations were conducted. The final verdict? The crash was caused by the pressurization system, which had been left in manual mode. The investigation uncovered clear negligence by the ground engineers who failed to reset the system. Multiple employees were charged and faced legal consequences for their role in the tragedy. The families of the victims were left in deep sorrow. Since then, aircraft manufacturers, especially Boeing, have placed greater emphasis on the safety of pressurization systems to prevent similar tragedies.